The top reasons why men disappear. Now, in this powerful interview, me and my wife Antia are going to be talking about why men disappear, what's the psychology going on in a man's mind, in his heart, in his soul that'll cause him to withdraw from a relationship and be completely out of contact. So you can avoid that and have a relationship that you want with him. So, without further ado, let's start diving in, and I'll introduce my wife and let her take it away with her first thoughts on the fear of commitment. And by the way, my wife Antia has been a relationship coach herself for over 10 years and studied personality psychology at UC Berkeley, and of course, attracted me. So, she obviously knows what she's doing. So, let's go ahead and dive in with the fear of commitment.
Yeah, 100%. So fear of commitment is number one, right? And of course, like sometimes we get close to sort of the commitment threshold, I call it, and it gets hot in the kitchen. And, some men, they're not ready to what I call jump through the ring of fire because when they commit, they're afraid to lose part of themselves. Okay. And Brody can attest to that too. Um, so for them, it's easier to simply disconnect so they can stay in the illusion. It's an illusion, right? That they don't have to change and they can stay the same.
Yeah, the illusion that they don't have to change. Yeah, that's interesting because I feel like the fear of commitment is really hidden within a lot of guys, and that they are not even realizing how afraid they are of commitment until things get hot, until the relationship starts progressing. But I think it's usually in the case when a man who is more avoidant is dating an anxious woman, and she starts getting a little more needy, a little bit more like questioning where the is going. Do you still love me? Uh, Texting him more often or causing more drama, that he starts feeling like, whoa, 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 like let's calm down here. And if she's not giving him that space, guys usually will just pull away to give them to force themselves that space by either not texting back or not calling back. I think that's a big part of how it usually shows up that I've seen.
And I think the other part is, and I'm sure a lot of women are going to say, yes, but in the beginning, he said, let's move in together, or, it'd be so fun for you to meet my mom, or, I don't have plans this summer. It would be so fun to fly, to the Caribbean together. Like, why is that happening, Brody?
Well, yeah, I mean that's the love bombing aspect, right? I mean, guys get really excited, I think, in the beginning. Most people get excited when something is new and fresh, right? It's a new relationship, it's a new adventure, what's going to happen? And everybody gets these huge expectations and these fantasies in their heads, right? Of what it's going to be like. And because we've been disappointed so many times, we've been on so many dates. Most singles have been on so many dates, been so many relationships that didn't work out, didn't go anywhere. And finally there's this guy in the picture, and he has this trait, and he's caring, and he's Christian, and he loves his mom, and he takes care of his hamster. And so there's all these things that are these reasons of why, you're looking at these traits. It's called the halo effect, right? We take one or two traits and we ascribe that as this person must be perfect. They must have all these good traits. Like just because they go to church every Sunday, they must be a fully practicing Christian, following everything in the Bible, and he's totally ethical and moral and everything. So we have to watch out for that, because that's what's going to cause these rose-colored glasses going in a relationship. And then so men will have this as well. Men will be dating a woman, they'll get excited and they'll say like, oh yes, I could already see us, being together for a long time, or I want to take you to Europe with me one of these days. You and me would have cute babies, whatever he might be saying. But then as the reality starts to set in of a relationship, that people have flaws, we're imperfect, then he starts feeling like the disillusionment can happen. It can happen to you. It could also happen to the guy. And when that happens, he can start to get scared. Like, what did I get into? So that's one aspect of it.
And would you say that's particularly true for a certain, attachment style, or would you say that's true across the board, no matter if you're a secure attachment style, an avoidant, or an anxious?
I think it can be true for the most part across the board, because I think even an avoidant can get somewhat excited when something's new and fresh, if they like what they see, if the person's their physical type if there's something they both share as a common interest, if the other person likes them a lot, that can be flattering. And then to feel like, oh, this person, maybe there is a possibility here. So I think even avoidance will get slightly excited in the beginning, um, but then or even a lot, even a lot excited, because then they could say, oh, maybe this person is going to be the ideal partner I've been looking for, where we really like each other and they give me all the space and they let me be myself, and I don't, maybe you don't even have to be exclusive. And so there can be this like illusion that the avoidant might have of finally finding this perfect person that's everything that they want, which is, all the benefits with none of the costs. Like,
Yeah.
they'll have sex with me, or they're attractive, or they're fun, and then I don't have to commit, though. I don't have to be there when they need me. I don't have to be emotionally responsible for their emotions. So that can happen even with avoidance. But I think secures, of course, will get excited, and anxious can be super excited off the charts when a relationship first starts if things are going well.
Would you agree though? I mean, like from our own experience, like you had like sort of a grounded excitement. You weren't like super like making me a ton of promises other than that I'm the girl of your story, but you weren't like, and that we have a huge responsibility to humanity, but you didn't say, I can't wait to introduce you to my mom, or I can't wait to take you back to wherever, you know what I mean, to wherever you lived and um all of that. So would you say that, sometimes actually not making you know, promising statements like that from the get-go could actually be more an indication of like you're dealing more with a secure man?
Yeah, I think so, because yeah, I was mostly secure when we met. I mean, it's slightly avoidant,
Yeah.
maybe. But yeah, it was because, wait, so what was your question? It was, can that be an indicator? I say it one more
Yeah,
time.
but actually not making the promises, right?
Oh,
Like not sort of the love bombing, not actually getting super excited, but just like being just grounded. That actually is more an indication of that you're dealing with a secure man.
yeah, yeah, I would say so, because a secure man is going to maybe have more experience knowing that people are imperfect, they know themselves are imperfect, they accept their flaws. And I think that's another thing with avoidance, is I think avoidance don't accept their flaws. I think they don't see it as an issue that they have problems with intimacy or have problems with commitment. They feel like that's maybe even a good thing. Of course, why should everybody should be like I am? Like, why? So I think a secure is more likely to see that they know people aren't perfect. They're not perfect. The other person's not perfect. And so they're less likely to be in these extremes, because that's what happens with the anxious avoidance, right? Is they get into these extremes of the way they see things and the ways they react and act in relationships. And that's why you can have this swing where that someone can be so excited in the beginning and all about it, all about the relationship, and then all of a sudden a week later they're totally and out of contact,
Yeah. Yeah.
and just like gone, just totally gone. You never hear from them again. It's because they have these extremes where they can either be all in or all out. And usually it goes from all in to all out, because that's where then they get back in their comfort zone of, okay, I had enough intimacy, I had enough excitement, that was fun. Now I want to be free again, or now I don't want to get hurt again, or now I don't want to get too close. So yeah, a secure is less likely to be like, oh, I see us walking down the aisle, like,
Yeah.
because like when we met, like I said, you're the girl of my story, but then I kind of balanced it out with, we're taking it one day at a time. Let's just kind of get to know each other. Like it seems like it's great, but let's also wait and see. So that's like a secure. It's like has a more realistic, balanced approach to the relationship, rather than these extremes, which are emotion driven extremes of like fear or excitement. It's like fear or passion, rather than just like being more comfortable and let's just be together, right?
Yeah, and that was actually that point number two that we wanted to address, right? Is actually that sometimes men disappear because of that parts conflict, because of they get excited on the one hand, but on the other hand, they want to be free, or they're afraid of intimacy because they got hurt before. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, they're afraid of intimacy because they got hurt before, and that caused the wounding where they are hesitant. Wait, what was your question one more time?
Well, point number two was all about parts conflict, and so just really like diving a little bit deeper into what that looks like for a man, like sort of the version of, part of him wants to have the relationship. Obviously,
Oh,
that's why
yes.
he started a conversation with you, right? But on the other hand, he's like kind of wants to protect himself, or he kind of wants to, keep his freedom or whatever.
Yeah, and I think it's like I see it like guys have different hats that they can wear. Like I have my different hats in the videos that the women have seen. But yeah, so guys have different hats they can put on. So like one hat they'll put on in the relationship will be, I'm a good boyfriend, I'm a good husband, I'm here for you, and I'm caring for you. And then all of a sudden that hat starts to get like really heavy and it starts to feel like a burden. And then they just throw the hat off and you're like, no, I'm putting back my Playboy hat or my free hat where I'm just a single bachelor and I don't want to be responsible for anybody and I want to, do my thing and not have to text somebody where I'm at or who I'm with or whatever. And so, but then eventually that hat may start to get heavy and it'll be like, oh, you know what? Actually, I do want to, be back with her and I want to cuddle and I want to say hi. So then he'll put that hat back on. So I feel like that's how the parts conflicts will show up is usually a guy, especially with an avoidant guy or a guy who's pulling away, is he starts to feel like it's becoming a burden of whatever that intimacy level has gotten to. And he literally has to like throw it off himself to go run around again and be free and be just with himself and not have to be responsible for anyone or not have to care about what anyone else is doing or what they're thinking. So that's kind of how I see it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I mean, of course, for me, from a women perspective, I'm always like, well, what is the woman doing that it turns into a burden, or is she doing anything, or is this just how it is? And, she just has to quote unquote deal with it, meaning like she has to move on, right? Because he has a conflict, unless he figures out himself, she's not going to be able to support him in that. Or is there a way where, she's contributing to for him to feel it like a burden? And I know burden is actually a very charged word, um, especially in the women world, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah, nobody wants to feel like a burden on the other person. I'm curious, what are your thoughts of what you feel like women can typically do that would make a man feel like uh, the relationship was a burden on him, especially an avoidant guy?
I know it's tricky because I actually feel like when a man goes into, if he's like more on the avoidance side, if he goes more into like sort of the love bombing, for her to be actually more sort of the balanced person, to not actually go all in and be like, yes, I love, like he's like, you're my dream woman. And for her to not say, you're my dream man, right? But like for her to actually be like a little bit, just kind of like be balanced, right? Because she knows, what, some of this has to come back into balance. And I don't want to know what that looks like. So I'd rather be the balance right now. You know what I mean? And
Yes.
yeah, just kind of like, what, like he's saying that now. Let's just see how this continues, right? So because you could say, well, what does that mean practically speaking, And what I would be saying is, you don't know this guy. You just know what he just said, but you don't know what that means and what that translates into a couple weeks down the road. So it's kind of like for the woman to say, uh, let's see. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like intentionally giving him space. I think that's one of the most powerful things a woman can do, especially with a man who's more avoidant. But I think that's even effective with a secure man that'll stop him from pulling away. Is you want to be proactive, like what you're sharing, is like actually uh, give him space and say, like, why don't we, see each other? Well, why don't we call it a night, or just like ending the
Yeah.
conversation early, ending the date early, like rather than letting it linger on to the point where now he feels it's heavy or he feels like he wants to get out, he wants the conversation to end, he wants the date to be over because he has all these other things that he needs to get to. So it's like, oh, I had a great time. It was great seeing you tonight, and yeah, hopefully we can do it again sometime. So it's like intentionally even ending it on a high note because you're giving him that space. Of course, when you're in a deeper relationship, when you're a committed relationship or a marriage, it's about saying, "Hey, you seem really stressed. Like, why don't you go on a walk? or why don't you go on a, why don't you go on a trip this Saturday and just go out and he must have he probably has a favorite activity that he loves. Maybe he loves to golf, surfing, hiking, sailing, whatever it might be. Say, why don't you go sailing this Saturday? Why don't you just take a break? I got the kids, or I'll take care of things, or I'm gonna hang out with Susan, your friend. So it's like being proactive to give him that space before he feels like he needs to take that space. That's really powerful. And it's good for you as well to also get into balance with yourself and saying, yeah, you need that space too. Like part of you needs that space. Maybe your anxious part is like, that's the scariest thing. Why would I give him more space? I'm already feel like I'm not giving enough from him. But then there's another part that's like, actually, I do want to finish that book that I started, or I do want to spend some more time with this girlfriend, or I do need some time for myself too to kind of recollect, journal, you know, come back to myself, right? And you teach that with a lot of your women. What are your thoughts on some practice strategies a woman can do to come back to herself in the relationship and not lose herself and give all herself away like an exploding balloon?
Like an exploding balloon. I was like, okay, wait, what does that have to
Or
do with giving?
I actually had an image of like a beached whale. You know how beached whales eventually they just like explode because they get so so much like gas is released inside. That's
Oh
like
my gosh.
it destroys everything. Like that's like the pent up anxious attachment style, right? It just has so much need and so much desire that it just like explodes onto the man. And like when are
Yeah.
we, uh it's just like all this like when are we getting married and when is this gonna happen? Yeah.
And I mean, and many women who have been following us for years know I talk about the six feminine archetypes, and to always, that's why I developed them because it's a very practical approach, right? Because you can literally say, well, where's my queen? Where's my priestess? And I was like telling just my clients this week, so often I really find that the relationship to God is totally out of balance, right? Like you're focusing so much on your husband and getting the love from your husband or from your partner. And you're totally forgetting that he's not the source of your happiness, right? God is, and so yeah, to really see sort of like there's sort of like the self to other, right? But what about also the self to self? You know what I mean? And to be really like, like my value is to have like an interdependent marriage, as opposed to like a codependent one. Because the codependent one will do two things. Either it's going to become dysfunctional and there's going to be resentments that are going to building up, right? Or you're going to hit a plateau. And a lot of plateaus end up in some sort of divorce, cheating, things like that, right? Because there's no more growth because, the woman is saying, I don't want to face what I'm afraid of, which is giving my husband space, for example, right? I'm giving my partner space. I need to stay in control of things, you know what I mean? And I would have to face that I don't really trust him, and I don't want to have that conversation because that's obviously like very edgy and I could totally lose him for that reason. And
Mm.
leaning into that edge. Yeah.
Yeah, codependence and versus interdependence. It's such an important conversation and lens to view relationships from, I feel, because I feel like one thing you can cultivate as a woman is to be in a relationship and start to get a sense for when does he need space, when do you need space, when does the relationship need space, when is it getting
Mm.
too hot, when is it getting too close, and you usually will know when you guys start bickering with each other over little things like dishes, or why didn't you text me earlier, or what silly things. I don't even know with stuff that we bicker about. It doesn't happen that often, but usually around the kids, around our kid, her baby.
Yeah, probably something
Something
around
like, why didn't you grab the diapers? Something
changing
like
the
that.
diaper. I think diapers is like a big,
But
and
kids is a
then
little
milk.
different. That'll bring stress and pressure into any relationship, no matter how healthy it is. But
Yeah, totally,
as
totally.
we've seen, as we've discovered,
And
uh,
so, but even like if you're not married in a relationship, like point number three is another reason why a man disappeared is because he wants to avoid confrontation, right? Because he basically doesn't want to, like, for example, feel inside of him, like, oh, I need to like now kind of tell her that, whatever, right? Like, I'm not interested, or I found someone else, or right now it's not the right time. because they don't like how they feel inside of themselves. And Brody may have some more wisdom on that. When they say that, it's almost like they're the bad guy, right? So it's almost like by them not confronting, almost I feel like they're not the bad guy, right? Which is of course super counterproductive. Um, and so, and then of course also they don't want to break your heart, right? So they're like, I don't want to be like in the presence of when the woman is sad and like heartbroken and disappointed, right? Like I don't want to be responsible for that. So I'm just gonna disappear.
Yeah. And it's really because guys don't want to hurt women. I mean, ultimately, nobody wants to hurt somebody else unless it's a real psychopath. People don't feel good when they know they've hurt somebody. And so, what guys will do is either they'll pretend their actions aren't hurting you, or they will reframe it and say, I'm actually doing this for her own good. Or what a lot of avoidance will do is I'm pulling away to avoid causing her more pain. Like I'm just going to pull away now rather than, uh, having to tell her I'm not interested and this is why, and I don't see the relationship going anywhere. Or I'm not ready for a relationship. And so guys will just ghost. And it's unfortunate. I'm not saying that's good, but it's a strategy a lot of guys have to avoid feeling like they're the bad guy, like you're saying, and to feel like they're avoiding more pain being caused in the situation. So yeah, it's an unfortunate method of handling the situation. So
Yeah, 100%. But I think what we want to drive home here is that it's so not about you. This has nothing to do about you. Like, you know what I mean? If he wants to avoid confrontation, it doesn't matter what you look like, how old you are, how charming you are. If he's afraid of confrontation, that's how he's going to act, right? So number four is,
well,
and that,
I'll add one thing onto that is
yeah,
that this men will not do this if they truly care about you enough and if they are invested enough in the relationship. So I feel like when a guy's not that invested, it's a convenient way to pull away even further and say, I'm avoiding confrontation. Maybe if he's telling himself that or not. But when a guy is actually invested in the relationship, he's going to override that, I feel, in a lot of situations. And he's still going to have those tough conversations with you. And he's still going to say, I don't feel like it's really hard for me to be in a relationship. I don't feel like I'm ready yet, but I want to become ready for you. Like I want to work through this.
right,
So
yeah.
don't fool yourself into thinking that he's pulling away just because he has all these traumas. It's also likely because he's just not that into you or he's just not that invested
Mm,
yet in the relationship for whatever reason.
mm.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks for adding that on, Brody, because that for sure helps. And number four is like, he got overwhelmed by personal issues, right? But I will say it does go into the avoidant category again, right? Because I've seen Brody get into, personal issues where I've seen men disappear and just suppress and just kind of like put their head in the sand, even if they're married, right? And I would say that goes definitely potentially more into the avoidant category, like an avoidant attachment style. That like, out of the sudden he has financial issues, out of the sudden something's going wrong with his company, out of the sudden there's overwhelm of the ex and the child custody battles, things like that. This is what I hear on a regular basis, right? And then the man just like disappears, or somebody just died. That's another one, like a sudden death, like the brother died or the dad died or something like that. Can you speak a little bit to that? Because that's a little bit more sensitive, Brody.
Yeah. So if a man has another personal issue that's emotionally, here's the key, it's emotionally pulling at him. So I don't believe if a guy just has like, stress at work and stuff like that, that's a real valid reason why he's pulling away. I feel it's usually something that's emotionally pulling him away, such as a death in the family, or he's still attached to an ex, and maybe he has drama with the ex, or he has a baby mama, or he is, co-parenting, or he's um, dealing with some, a friend died or something like that. So those are usually the cases when he will pull away because of a personal issue. And those could be cases that will happen even if he is still emotionally attached to you. So yeah, so that's something you want to look out for. Maybe look at his social media if you're wondering what happened. Don't stalk him, but you could at least check and see if there's any updates on his social media, like if somebody's saying sorry to hear what happened, it's very unlikely that that'll give you any answers. If he is having personal issues and he still really cares about you, you're just going to have to wait, probably. Unfortunately, you're just going to have to wait. That doesn't mean putting your life on hold. Still go do things that you enjoy, work on yourself, be social, get your emotional needs met. But you give him space and wait for him to potentially come back if you know that's an issue, or if you suspect that could be an issue. So that's what I'll say about that.
And to make sure, because I also talked about, I forgot what I called that, but like basically the excuses avoidant men use to get distance and space, you know what I mean? So to make sure it's not one of these either, you know what I mean? And you will find out over time.
Yeah, and look for patterns. Look for
Yeah.
patterns. I mean, it depends on how long you've known this guy, but try to see patterns. Like, did he not get back to you for a while after your first date? And then he's doing this 2 weeks later, where he's all of a sudden out of contact for several days, and he told you something was going on with his dog, but then he's going on a little too long. So you see the pattern that he's been pulling away like this several times. It's probably more likely that he's an avoidant or he's not that into you than that there's a real personal issue going on.
Yeah, it's a good distinction. I know it's painful, but it's better to hear it now and to end it now, than to hold on to something that where he's just not that invested, right? Now, number 5, and I thought it was really interesting, Brody, that you mentioned that one, is feeling inadequate. So like men would disappear because they feel inadequate. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so if a man feels like he knows what you want and he knows what you deserve. So, for example, he knows you want marriage, he knows you want kids, or he knows that you want a committed relationship with someone you can see several times a week. And he also knows he's not capable of giving you that either because he's emotionally not capable, he's feels like he judges himself as being financially incapable, or that he just knows he doesn't have really great relationship skills or social skills, and he can't really give you what you need or what he may even feel that you deserve. So he'll feel inadequate within himself, and this can cause him to pull away because of shame, because of guilt, because of fear of losing you, fear of screwing it up, which then he actually creates his fear, self-sabotage. It's his way of creating that. So yeah, so that's what you want to, that could be a cause, something you can look for. The way you would may know this is if he's already in the beginning of your relationship starting to use apologetic language, like, I'm sorry I couldn't be there earlier, or I feel so bad that I wasn't available on your when you were sick last weekend, or he's just constantly having to apologize for things which are intentional. Maybe he didn't get back to you, he didn't do this, he didn't do that, and he knows he didn't do it, and he feels so bad about it. Um, that's a sign that he's likely in this state where he just feels inadequate. He doesn't. He knows he can't give you what you need. So this could also be a way of preventing further heartbreak by him pulling away, and it may actually be good for you. Unfortunately, these guys will usually also use the same tactics we talked about earlier, like avoiding confrontation. So he may also just ghost on you rather than having a real conversation about why he's pulling away. So that's kind of what's going on there, I feel.
All right. Yeah. That's so good. And I love that you explained that a little bit more because I think it's more healing to hear that from a man's perspective, right? Because the last one is childhood wounds. And the way I see with childhood wounds is twofold. One is communication patterns at home. There's like this communication pattern at home where you were outright fighting, which by the way was my parents, and didn't care about if the neighbors heard it and all of that, right? So no problem, everybody can know our business. As opposed to there's other families where nothing leaves this house. You know what I mean? Everything is being kind of sort of put on kind of like swept under the carpet, right? And if you grew up in a household where you were trained that, let's sweep things more under the carpet, right? We're like just not going to talk about this kind of stuff, right? Then guess what? When things got a little tense and you're not quite sure, right? What do? You just sweep it under the carpet. And one of the versions of that is to disappear.
Yeah, and if he had someone who abandoned him when he was younger, he could become the one that abandons. And that could be his way of protecting himself. and in a twisted way also trying to protect you by doing the thing that is actually going to hurt you, which is really bizarre. So again, this none of this is rational. Relationships will bring out the irrationality in people, and a lot of our irrationality is also driven from childhood experiences. They don't make logical sense as adults, but they're wired inside of us as little kids. And speaking of parts conflict that we talked about earlier, we all still have a little child inside of us. And that little child will often make little child decisions, and we will act on those little child decisions. So he may be doing that either fear of abandonment, maybe he was abused, he doesn't want to abuse you. So when he starts noticing those tendencies in himself, he pulls away, again, trying not to hurt you, ends up hurting you anyways because he pulled away. Or he is, yeah, of course, he's an avoidant. He could be an avoidant because he was getting inconsistency in his upbringing. And so he doesn't feel safe with intimacy. He doesn't feel like it's really love for him. That real love is when I'm with a woman who doesn't give me what I want and who is causes a lot of drama as in abusing me. So this will happen both ways with both genders, where someone who was in an avoidant, anxious situation growing up will then attract partners who are, or being attracted to partners who are giving them inconsistency, drama, abuse, because then they feel like, oh, that reminds me of my childhood. That must mean I'm loved in a weird way. So you might actually be a secure woman, and you might actually be a great partner, and you happen to attract a man, which likely is because there is something inside of you that did attract him to have that issue as well, that there's maybe a part of that inside of you as well. But now you attracted this man who is playing out these patterns, and you don't need to put it on yourself. You don't need to blame yourself necessarily for all of that he's doing, and just realize he's looking for something else, and it's actually a good sign for you that you should find somebody else too, somebody who's more secure, who's not going to try to be bringing drama and this push-pull dynamic into your relationship just so they can feel loved. Maybe there's some change that'll happen. Maybe there's some healing that he might go through, but it's very unlikely, and he has to do that on his own. So, you know, use your own discernment and judgment to decide if this is actually an unhealthy situation and when you need to draw the line in the sand and say no. I'm looking for a relationship that's healthy and balanced, and I'm not going to go through this drama. And I know you need healing, but it's not going to be through me. It doesn't have to be through me. It shouldn't be through me.
100%, it's kind of like holding the man also accountable as well, because we tend to want to heal and save and rescue when we notice that the man has like a childhood pattern and wound, but to actually be like, no, but it's still yours to heal. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And you have to be very careful because narcissists will use that as a tactic as far as you need to heal me. Like you owe me to help me heal through this. Like if you really love me, you're gonna walk this path with me, and we're gonna go through it together. And that just gives him justification to continue doing those bad behaviors because now you're more like his nurse of sorts, helping him, his psychologist or his therapist, helping him, even though you're on the receiving end. And so it's very unhealthy dynamic to be in. You are not his therapist. You are not his nurse. You're not his mommy. He needs to heal his on his own, and he needs to get his own real therapist or go to his real mommy to try to get some of that healing that he's looking for rather than through you. So, yep, powerful stuff today. So awesome. Thanks for listening. We hope you got some value, and make sure to subscribe and take our free love quiz as well. If you're really ready to attract the loving, long-term, and committed relationship you want fast, go to getlovequiz.com or click on this training, click below this training, click the link there to get that now. And we will talk to you again very soon.
Mwah!
Bye-bye.
Bye.